Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today's a Q&A episode, and I have three questions I want to dive into. So just real quick, just as a reminder, if you like me going through these questions and you want yours answered, just give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. And every Monday I have a question box that's up and I'll take my favorite questions. You can also just shoot me over a question on Instagram as well too. And if it's a good question, I'll usually go through it on here too, especially if I don't get as many in the question box. But again, every Monday I'll do that. So if you haven't yet, give me a follow there. So yeah, three questions today. So let's dive into them. So my first question I have are, what are the advantages slash disadvantages of using mostly protein powders to hit your target? Protein's challenging. I just had a post on Instagram, trying to be funny, just kind of mentioning how protein it has the highest thermic effect on your wall as well too, right? It's super expensive. So there's that. And then just to make your protein, it can be super challenging to get in the protein that you need to get in, especially when we start thinking about from a body composition standpoint, the amounts that we recommend from that standpoint. You're looking at about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Some people can go even higher. And then that's also going to be dependent on like your body fat levels. Someone who's 300 pounds, you probably don't necessarily need to have 300 grams of protein. You could go a little bit lower than that. But as long as you can digest it, I wouldn't see any downside of you going higher, especially if you're trying to drop some body fat there. But again, we know it can be super expensive. And again, it can just be challenging to get all your protein in from food sources because you got to make it. Most of the protein you need, you have to prepare it in some way, right? Now, obviously, things like Greek yogurt, stuff like that, you don't necessarily have to, but most protein sources you're going to have to prepare, which can be tough for people. But again, when we think about protein, man, it's just so important from a body composition standpoint. I think even when we think health too, maybe you don't necessarily need to have these massive amounts, but I still think that we need more than what most people get. Again, we're still looking at, I would say, anywhere from 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. If we're really focused on body comp, probably 1 gram, maybe even north of that. And again, you're going to get some distinct benefits from protein. One of them being, one, it obviously is going to help with body composition. Two, we can use it to help increase our overall daily energy expenditure by utilizing the concept of thermic effect of food, which is the energy, the calories you expend absorbing and digesting food. And protein uses the most energy to absorb and digest. And then you obviously are going to have the impact of the satiety side of things, right? It's going to help you feel more satiated in general. And then usually when we have a protein goal and we follow some sort of moderation around our caloric intake, it improves your diet quality as a byproduct. So again, this is why I'm a huge fan of getting in enough protein. So in saying that, what would be the advantages and disadvantages of using mostly protein powders to hit targets? One, depending on the brand that you're using, right? Now, we do want to be smart with our choice of who we choose from our protein powder, but the type of protein you're looking at is going to be high quality protein, right? Whey protein is high quality. So that's going to be a pro, is that you're going to be guaranteed higher quality of protein. And you can get it with minimal amounts of fat and carbohydrates as well too, right? That's another kind of added benefit of that there. And so when I say high quality protein, I'm also saying, hey, it's going to have all the essential amino acids that we need from a body composition standpoint. Now, you can certainly get that through combinations of proteins, right? So we talk like a pea and rice blend or something along those lines, and that will help you also get those essential amino acids that you need. But again, in the research, it's like you can build muscle on maybe lower quality proteins. Again, we're talking proteins that don't have all the essential amino acids, but you might need a little bit more of those types, right? So you're going to get a little bit more bang for your buck in high quality protein with whey protein that's typically used in protein powders. Now, in saying that, you may get a plant-based one, which is usually going to be like a rice and pea blend or something along those lines. Again, those are the types of proteins that we're looking for, which would end up being high quality because you're getting that combination there. To me, that's going to be the big advantage is you're just going to get higher quality protein, and we know it's going to have all those essential amino acids. Another advantage is going to be the convenience aspect of it. You can't really argue that. It's going to be super convenient. You could just dump it in water, shit, whatever it is, and you're going to get that protein. No, you just scoop it in and you're good to go. So to me, those would be the biggest advantages. And then again, it's going to help you hit your goal because of those two things there. Disadvantages, you may be missing out on like the chewing aspect of actual food, which could lead to a little bit lower satiety. So again, if we're looking at, hey, we're getting all our protein from protein powder compared to somebody who gets all their protein with, again, meats and foods that you actually chew and have a little bit more like food volume, I would say you're going to get a little bit more satiety benefit from that type of stuff, right? So one potential downside there is the satiety side of things. If that's an issue for you, you may want to reconsider that. You're likely going to be missing out on certain micronutrients, right? Just because, again, certain things like meats are going to have B vitamins, zinc, iron, stuff that is super important, which won't get as much of that in, say, whey protein powder. Now, you can make all that up elsewhere in the diet, but just understand you may be missing out on certain vitamins and minerals. Also, another one would be like, hey, in meat, you're going to find creatine, which you wouldn't find in, I guess some proteins would have it, but again, you could still get that through supplementation. No matter what, I'm still going to recommend somebody supplement with creatine. So again, we wouldn't, but if we're just looking at, hey, you don't supplement with creatine and you just get your protein from powder, you may be missing out on that. But again, we can make this up elsewhere in the diet there. Gut health, for some people, this amount of protein powder could be bad on their digestion and gut. Now, you can make the argument that too much of animal meats or just meat protein, right? Food sources of protein could also do the same thing as well too. Again, maybe a balance would be the right way to go. But I could see where you have too much of certain types of protein powder could lead to some gut issues, some digestion issues. So you would need to look out for that. And then maybe cost, I would say that could be a potential disadvantage, but it could be an advantage. But I know protein powder is pretty expensive, but so is actual protein from like food sources. So again, cost could potentially be something here. So I would say what I try to do with clients is we want to utilize protein powder, but my goal is to limit how much they have from like bars and like protein powders, right? Let's get some of it in. Again, if you have a high protein goal here and you're not used to eating higher protein, it's going to be a great way to supplement into it. But if I look at your food log and it's like, hey, everything's coming from like protein bars or protein powder, that's where it's like, hey, I want you to add in more food for all these reasons that I just mentioned there. Again, you're going to get the micronutrients. You're going to be able to get the satiety of it. From a gut health perspective, I think a balance is good. So I would say if you eat 4 meals a day, I would say no more than 2 from like protein bars and powders is what we're going to shoot for. Now, certain periods of time, certain days, where you're at in your journey may lend to a little bit more, a little bit less. But generally speaking, I think if you're getting more than double, like half your protein from this stuff, we need to look at food, like getting it in through food, or at least finding ways to get it in with more food sources of protein. So again, we can certainly use it. As far as timing goes with it, really doesn't matter. Most people are like, oh, you should only use protein after a workout. But again, really what the goal of like protein powder is to just help you get more protein in your diet. You can use it afterwards, after workout. You can use it really at any time of the day there. So that's my thoughts on it. But let me know if you have any questions on this there. Again, protein powder can be great, but we can potentially overdo it there. All right. So next question is lower resting heart rate during a deficit. Why is this? I'm a big fan of tracking resting heart rate for clients. It's a great way to show overall cardiovascular health as well as like stress. So a good number to aim for is probably between 45 and 60, 65-ish. Again, I think the big thing is wherever you're at, if we can see it trend down, that's a good sign. And then you'll see that during times of stress or poor sleep, it will come up. And really all that means is your body's just working harder and you need to prioritize more restorative type stuff when it's that way in the short term. So like, for example, when I'll be doing my cardio, this is where I can see it show up the most is days when my resting heart rate is higher, I have to go at a slower pace from a cardio standpoint. And so this is where, if you just look at like heart rate in your training, this is where you can maybe spin your wheels from improving your cardiovascular fitness, because then you end up slowing your pace and then you're not actually like changing because you're just looking at your heart rate. But so this is why I have to change like looking at my like speed and what's my power output and what that looks like. But what I'm getting at with this is when your heart rate's higher, again, your body is just working harder. And so if it's always that way, you could see how it could be harder to, from an under recovery standpoint, how it could be harder to progress like your cardio training and even your weight training as well too, because your body is a little bit more stressed. I like tracking resting heart rate for that reason, because it shows clients how their choices can impact stress levels, which in turn can impact our ability to change our body and perform well and everything like that, right? So I'm a big fan of tracking resting heart rate for those reasons. Again, the big thing from a number standpoint, I think anywhere from 45 to 65 is solid, but don't get too caught up in those numbers. The most important thing is where it's trending over time, and we want to see that trend down there. Now, the downside of tracking resting heart rate is people could get in their head of, oh, now I need to really cut back training. And I think you could potentially spin your wheels. So you want to use it to be like, okay, hey, I don't necessarily need to like not train now, or I need to just not do anything. It's just, hey, I need to focus more on restorative type stuff on there. So again, it can be super helpful in that standpoint. But one thing I have seen though is during deficits, clients and my resting heart rate tends to be lower. Okay. And I think it's a combination of things. One, lower body weight. I think lower body weight in general is going to lead to a lower resting heart rate. Just think about it. Your body's just not working as hard for every beat because you don't have as much. So a lower body weight's going to do that. And then the big thing though is going to be from a total daily energy expenditure. Okay. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. Your body just is going to be a little bit more, I can't think of the word here that I want to use. It's just going to adapt down a little bit. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. This is people try to avoid this. And it's just going to happen when you're bringing in less energy, your body is going to be a little bit more efficient with the energy that you're expending, right? And so again, from an overall cardio standpoint, that's probably a good thing, right? So this is where you get into this conundrum here, but okay, so does that mean I always need to be in a deficit? No, but again, just generally speaking, your body is just going to have to work a little less when you're in a deficit because again, it's just your body's more adaptable. Essentially, you're more efficient with the energy that you're using. Whereas when we're at maintenance or higher, our body's a little bit more wasteful. So you can see where this is why I think when we think long-term health here, I think spending some periods of time in a deficit is going to be the way to go long-term. So again, that doesn't mean you necessarily need to be in a deficit for 6 months out of the year, but maybe once you get to a body composition, you feel good and it's like, hey, once a year or once every other year or in X amount of time, I'm going to be in a deficit for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it may be. Again, it could be a small deficit, it could be a little bit more aggressive, but whatever it is, I think it's important for us to spend some periods of time for looking long-term health to spend some time in a deficit for this reason. But also, again, on top of this, lower TDEE, lower total daily energy expenditure is also from less food coming in. Your body's not having to process, absorb, and digest as much food. And then obviously, it could also be like more short-term things like lower stress, improved sleep, and improved diet quality. Those could all be things that help lower your resting heart rate when you're in a deficit versus outside of it. So those would be the main reasons why your resting heart rate would be lower in a deficit there. All right, so that's that question. So the last one is somebody struggling with sleep and they want to know what are the most important things to focus on, right? Because I think a lot of times, a lot of people think it needs to be more time in bed. And again, for some people, that could be the case. If you're sleeping 4 hours, I do think that more time in bed is going to be good for you. But if we're already hitting like 7, 8, 9 hours in bed and we aren't feeling like we're rested or whatever it may be, then these are the things that we really need to focus on. And again, even if you do just sleep 4 hours, focusing on these things are going to allow for better quality sleep here. So I think if we can nail down these 3 things, it allows us to potentially decrease the amount of sleep we need. Again, I still would try to get as much as possible. I think it's always going to be better to get, let's say, okay, you hear this and now you're like, now I just need to get 6 hours of sleep. I think you're going to see better health benefits from 7 to 8. But for a lot of people, they're busy and just being like, hey, get more sleep is just not feasible for a lot of people. And we can use these 3 things to our advantage because again, it sets you up for better quality sleep. And so every little bit that you do sleep is going to be higher quality than if you're sleeping 8 hours and these aren't nailed down, you're just getting in bed for longer periods of time. Okay. So again, 90% of our sleep is going to come down to these 3 things. So first is going to be schedule regularity. What that means is waking and going to bed and waking up around the same time each day and night. Now, I don't think you need to nail this at, hey, I have to be in bed by 8:15 every night and I need to be up by 5:17 every morning. We can give ourselves about an hour or so here. Again, the further we go away from it, the more it's going to impact us. So we want to make sure that we're not going too far. And just understand too, it's also how often you do it. So if you do it once a week where, hey, you have an event go on and you have to be asleep a little bit later, all right, it's no big deal. Right. But the more often we do it, the more regular it is, that's where it's going to start to impact us. I also think that what the rest of your lifestyle looks like is also going to be important here. If we're not hitting all our other lifestyle stuff, this is going to impact us even more. And all the other lifestyle stuff if it is in check, is going to counteract this a little bit more. So there's that. So again, what we do overall is also going to play a role here. But again, sleep regularity is going to be when you wake or when you go to sleep and when you wake up. And again, I think within an hour each night is going to be key. Big thing being, we get a lot of our deep sleep early in the night, and we also get a lot of REM sleep as well too early in the night. And if that goes off, if we're again going to bed at a different time, we may miss out on the important parts of sleep by not getting to sleep at the same time. There again, I think within an hour, anything more than that, just understand you're kind of playing with fire in a way. And then there was a study that recently that came out, I think like last year at some point, that showed that sleep regularity was slightly more important than sleep quality. Sorry, not sleep quality, sleep quantity, how long you slept. So again, making sure that we get to sleep at a fairly regular time and wake up around the same time is going to be key. So if we can do that, we're already going to set ourselves up for better quality sleep there. Next thing we're going to have is our light environment. Okay. So light environment being, again, the amount of light we get throughout the day in terms of like sunlight, getting exposure to bright light early in the day, and then light being what we do before bed, trying to avoid a ton of blue light right before bed, right? So like the big thing would be like looking at your phone screen right before bed, watching a long movie right before bed. Again, we can offset this by potentially using blue light blocking glasses. Again, from my understanding, the research is kind of like mixed on that, but I think to be safe, that would be a great thing to invest in there. I use them not as much as I should be, but I do have them and I'm trying to make it a habit to use it more. So again, our light environment's important. So again, it starts with the daytime. It's getting sunlight as early as you can, getting as much, not as much as you can, but getting more overall throughout the day, especially if you're just always inside. And then again, avoiding that blue light at night. So again, if we can nail those two things, we're going to set ourselves up for much better sleep. And again, this is going to be much better advice than just being like, oh, hey, go sleep for 8 hours. Because again, we want to get some regularity. We want to make sure we set ourselves up for good sleep by setting up our light environments. So again, also dimming the lights at night too can be helpful there. And then again, if you do wake up in the middle of the night, try to avoid as bright of light as possible. I know when Colby was born, for me, the big thing was if I did wake up, I try to keep it as dark as possible. Again, there's times where that's just not feasible, but again, trying to avoid it as much as possible there. And the last thing we have is our balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic. So this is sympathetic is your like fight or flight state, and then parasympathetic is your rest and digest. Okay. So again, we want to have checks and balances there with that. It's okay to have sympathetic activities and to be in that sympathetic state. We want to, but when it starts to get out of whack, when we're constantly there and we don't have things in place to lower that and to balance it out, that's where we run into issues. And it's going to be harder for you to fall asleep. It's going to be harder for you to get good quality sleep. This could be some things that can impact this would be your overall stress. And then on top of it, you don't have anything to counteract that. This could also be, hey, you're having a ton of caffeine throughout the day, late in the day, and then now your sympathetic state is a lot higher, right? It could be you do demanding stuff before bed, whether that be like an intense conversation, work, exercise right before bed. Again, that balance is going to be off as you get to bed. So I think it's overall balance, but it's also really balancing it out right before bed as well too. If you were to look at what's most important, it's balancing it out right before bed, but then also the overall balance of it is also super important as well too. And so it's like, how do we get there? Again, making sure that you're not exercising too much, you're exercising in the right amount, but you also have the balance side of things in check. You're incorporating some breath work, restorative type movement, just getting out of your own head, right? So again, for some people that's journaling, it's getting outside in nature, whatever it is for you, just making sure you get more of that, because it can be super easy to just be in this constant fight or flight state in today's modern environment if you're not going out of your way. If you're somebody who just naturally you're all just wired that way to just always be go, you're someone who is a like high performer or high achiever and you always want to be doing the next biggest thing, again, you're going to struggle with this. You have a lot on your plate, you have kids, full-time job, relationships you have to take care of. Again, if you're that person, you need to have more parasympathetic balance in there. But then there's always going to be that person that they just, stress doesn't affect them. And for you, you might need a little bit more sympathetic and you don't necessarily need to worry about this. But again, like I said, I think the big thing is overall balance, but then most important being that balance right before bed. So making sure that you get in a really relaxed state before bed. So this is looking, hey, let's get a good wind down routine going before bed versus, hey, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to go do this demanding thing, and then I'm going to go straight to bed. Again, you're going to miss out on quality sleep, and you're probably going to have a harder time getting to sleep there. So again, these are the 3 things that we can do. If we nail these down, it's going to allow you to be able to get away with a little less sleep or still get the same amount and get more out of your sleep as well too. And with this, you're going to feel better. Your brain health is going to be better. Your body composition change is going to be much more efficient. It's going to be easier to maintain a healthy body composition. So again, and you're going to be able to push training more. So again, it's a lot of direct and indirect effects here. Motivation is going to be higher. Hunger is going to be in check. So again, there's a lot of things that sleep will impact. That's it for this episode. Again, if you haven't yet, make sure you give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. And then lastly, if you have any questions on any of the topics I went over today or questions about your own, or you're just interested in learning more about working with me, my free 30-minute strategy call is for you. The link to that is in the show notes. I also have my free body recomp checklist. So again, if you're not sure on where to start or you just want to check to make sure you're on the right track, that I would check that out. The link to that is in the show notes as well too. So that's it for me. I'll chat with you guys next time.